Okay, thanks very much, Almouth. I feel as if I should start off by promising that I'm not going to storm the stage and take over the hosting of this event. If you were at Liverpool last week, you know that myself and John Rees from Counterfire were barred, at least for a while, from conference because apparently we were going to storm the stage. I did point out to those organisers that I'm 63 and probably not going to storm anywhere, but that's where we are. So look, we are just over a week after the end of conference, and I think the first thing to say is that it's fantastic that we actually have got to this point. For a few weeks, I actually wondered whether we would ever get to conference and whether we would get there as a whole, one group together. So it was good to get to conference. It was good to get your party officially established, and I've seen some stuff on social media this week saying that in the aftermath, it looks like the numbers of people joining the party have increased, perhaps maybe now up towards 60,000 and approaching the Lib Dems in terms of membership. So all of that is very positive. It is worth reminding ourselves that when we first announced this, there was 800,000 people showing interest. So, there is some level of disappointment that we're only at 60,000, and I think that's understandable, but nevertheless 60,000 is a good starting point from there. As Alma said, now the question really turns to how we take things forward, and the first thing obviously to acknowledge, I think, is that over the last few months, one of the reasons why I think we have only got 60,000, however strong that is, but one of the reasons I think we've only got 60,000 is that the founding process has been marred in factional division. There has been those around the centre of the organisation, around the independent MPs, who have tried to really have a very top-down approach to conference. We had the selection of candidates through sortition. We had tight control over what amendments could be taken. I must admit, I thought it was strange at conference that we were debating for half an hour over whether, in fact, we were against austerity. I just didn't think that was worth wasting our time on. Surely there's nobody that was going to argue vice versa, or that the working class should be at the centre of the party, or that they were a socialist organisation. It seems to me that we're having debates on those as a way of filling the time rather than down to the real issues that we wanted to speak about. So there was control over who was going to conference. There was control over the amendments that were taken and the motions that were taken on the one side. And on the other side, there were those around Zara who were trying to differentiate themselves, I think, from the membership. And we had a whole number of wedge issues that were put in place to try and distinguish the two separate groups. And overall, my view is that that's not really been that helpful in the last couple of months. We really need to think about the vast amount that we have in common. Now, sometimes that's referred to as, the 80% that we have in common, the 20% that we have in disagreement. And of course, that can be a very useful way of thinking about things. For the vast majority of us, there is vast amounts that we share in common. We are for Palestine. We are against imperialism and war. We are for an end to the cost of living crisis. We are for the renationalisation of the railways, of the waterways, of gas and electricity. We are for greater investment in welfare services and the National Health Service. We are for an end to student fees and for free education for all, like was the system when I went through university all those years ago. So there is a vast amount that we have in common. And of course, as socialists, there are areas of debate that we have, and we need to create a safe space to have those debates. But it does seem to me that for too long, many of those issues in that 20% have become wedge issues as ways to divide ourselves. And of course, on the left, we have a history of picking at scabs to make sure that they bleed, and then saying, how shocking it is when they do those things. So now that we've got to conference, now that we have a registered party, now that we have a clear direction of travel, it does seem to me that the first thing that we should be saying is that we need to think about the things that we have in common, and we need to stop the factional fighting from both those who were making the charge in the run-up to conference. I think there was huge enthusiasm last Saturday. It's not the case that the whole event was just one big bun fight. There was lots of people there, really excited, really enthused that at long last there was a left of Labour Party alternative coming into play, and that's something that I think all of us would be welcoming. And there was 2,500 people there at conference. The majority of them were excited at the prospect of a new party being established in that way. So we've come out of conference. We have to avoid the dangers of returning to a faction fight. There are potential for that to happen. One of the decisions, of course, at conference was that we should have a collective leadership rather than a sole leader or a dual leader. And I think people voted for collective leadership as a rejection of the faction fighting that had taken place, and saw collective leadership as a way of taking us forward in the next phase of the party, and collective leadership which has a vision of moving forward, of thinking, of pushing your party outwards rather than internally, is what I think people were looking for. But there are dangers. There are dangers that we could have slates of two factions who just embed the faction fight of the last 2 months in their respective slates in the run-up to the elections for the collective leadership. And I think that's something that we absolutely need to avoid. So there are dangers ahead, but if we focus on pushing your party outwards, if we focus on building branches and thinking about how your party can embed itself in our local communities, our local social movements, our local trade union movements, if we think about your party as a campaigning network, and if we start to think about how we can bring those campaigns into the elections that are coming around in May, we need to get a move on to do that. So that means very, very quickly thinking about selection of candidates and how we run the campaigns in May as outward-looking, outward-facing organisations. So to do that, I think I think we really need to focus on what we have in common. And the way that I would like to suggest this at the start of the meeting really is to maybe think about 4 or 5 points that we could campaign as your party around the country, and absolutely embed ourselves in communities and think about bringing ourselves together as a unified party. And to do that, the first one to me means concentrating on what we might call a new start for broken Britain. If you look at all the opinion polls, the absolutely central issue for people in Britain is the cost of living crisis. It's the fact that every month people struggle to pay their rent, put food on the table. It's the fact that there will be close to 1 million children in Britain this evening going to bed hungry. The disgrace that some of them won't be going to bed because they don't have a bed to sleep on. Those dramatic levels of poverty that have increased over the last 10 to 15 years. We have got, alongside that, fantastic levels of inequality. One of the most unequal countries in the world, and we need to be absolutely clear that those two things are related. We are poor, we are struggling because at the top of the society there is a minority who are benefiting hugely from the kind of society in which we live in. And we've got to be the party that talks about the cost of living crisis, the inequality crisis, and how we address it. Linked to that, I think broken Britain means addressing the broken services that we have: rail, transport, waterways, gas, electricity. They're hugely expensive, they're not very good, and yet there are shareholders at the top who are creaming off vast amounts in share dividends from those industries. Those industries need to be brought back into public ownership, and we need to use the resources rather than going to share dividends. They need to be brought back in to provide the infrastructure, to improve the rail networks, the bus networks, the waterways, rather than just putting those on bills for people, ordinary people. And it means investment in our welfare services. So we need further investment in education, in hospitals, in the NHS, in community health, in universities, in student grants rather than fees. These are things that absolutely are at the heart of broken Britain, and we need to address them, and they should be the first things that we are addressing, each and every one of us. The second thing I think tied to this is that they tell us there's no money for any of those services, and yet they want to increase spending on warfare and on munitions. There's now, across Europe, we see the return of conscription, with some MPs talking about the need for conscription in Britain. So the second thing I think we should be quite clear about is that we are in favour of welfare, not warfare, that we are against conscription, we're against the forever wars that we have experienced for the last 20 to 25 years in this country. We are against the huge rearmament programmes that are being driven through at the expense of ordinary people. And we need to stand up, of course, for the Palestinians and for a just solution in the Middle East to the people of Palestine, but also of Syria, of Iraq, and the mess that we have made in that entire part of the world. The third thing I think that unites us is that we are absolutely united against Tommy Robinson, against Farage, and against the Islamophobia and horrific levels of racism that we see in Britain today. Almost and myself, we sit in a council where we're in the main opposition group to Reform, but Reform are the main political party in Lancashire. They've got 53 councillors. We're the main opposition. We've got 11. So we see what that means, and that means that they are closing older people's homes. It means that they are undermining SEND services. But cheer up, those things are going. They're all in support of putting flags on lampposts. Oh, and they've now told us that we've got to stand and sing the national anthem at every council meeting. They want to play the culture wars. We've got to reject the culture wars, and we've got to stand up to the racists of Farage. We've got to stand up to the racists of Reform, and we've got to stand up to the racists like Tommy Robinson in the council.
Sorry, Michael, I'm going to have to just give you a warning. Just a minute warning, please.
Okay, in the councils, in our communities, and on the streets if we need them. The fourth thing is that the Stammer government, the Labour government, are an authoritarian government, and we need to stand up against their authoritarianism. The move to ID cards, the restrictions on our freedoms of speech, our freedom to march, our freedoms to mobilisation. And the final thing, the final demand, I think, is that we should stand up to say that we are for a world free of discrimination and oppression. You know, the right wing want us to get involved in culture wars. That's the kind of left that they want to portray us as. We need to reject that. We need to say that we are for unity of black and white, of Muslim, Christian, Hindu, and people of no faith. We are for the unity of men and women. It doesn't matter if people are gay or straight. People have at heart the common problems that we have outlined above. And we have to be against oppression in all its forms, and we have to make sure that we're in a position to reject their attempt, the establishment attempt, the right's attempt to divide us by playing oppressed groups off against each other. And we have to reject that. And I think if we take those 5 themes forward, then we can unite your party in a way which gets away from the horrors of the faction fight of the last few months and builds your party as a fighting force in our communities, in our movements, in our unions, and at the ballot box. Thanks, Alice.